Welcome to Beauty Talent Talk. I'm your host, Debbie Johnson. So our mission at Beauty Talent Talk is to inspire, share expert insights, empower personal and professional growth. So today we have our guest, Jackie Staub, commercial sales executive working across some of the biggest brands, L'Oreal, Coty, Estée Lauder. Jackie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Debbie, for having me.
Absolutely. And Kirsty, our moderator.
Yes, I am indeed here, and we are very lucky to have Jackie today. So as we're going through, if you do have any questions or want any clarification or anything, please do pop them in the chat and I will make sure to bring them up to Jackie and Debbie.
Wonderful. So our topic today is the evolution of beauty education and skills that sell. So the retail landscape has evolved, and that requires sales professionals and skills to evolve as well. And it's an important topic. You know, when we see the impact that happened in 2025 with so many jobs in the beauty industry that were restructured or downsized, sales education certainly had a major factor into that. And so I want to first frame our conversation, Jackie, with let's go back 15 years and let's talk about what did the model for sales and education look like then?
You know, I think this is such an important conversation because even as I was trying to think about then and now and being a GM at that time, I had a very robust team that kind of carried all functions. And even that role has changed now, looking at the big strategics like L'Oreal, Estée Lauder, and Coty. But 15 years ago, you're talking circa 2010, 2012, and when I went to think about it, I'm like, Jesus, we had an education department that had a very clearly defined role. You know, it had clear budgets. You know, we had a very distinguished or deciphered department of sales that were sales functions in field, education that was a dedicated education person that I had regionally, and then the marketing functions. And those that were very delineated at that time. You know, there were really strong regional education networks that were supported. So if you think you had the East and the West and maybe lots of people popping up in education, I think teams were resourced extremely well. There was a lot of people. I think people weren't complaining as much about resources at that point. And global also was really heavily involved in terms of supporting the funding towards, if you had a global brand that had a regional focus, they funded training tools. They funded a lot of in-person seminars. I think field educators at that point in time were really enabled. And so the sales team, they fundamentally just focused on selling at that point in time. But then you step back a little bit more and think, what else has changed? And you're like, wow, the model was really broad. And I think it was really in-store dominant. You look at digital penetration. Digital penetration at that point was only about 10, 15%. That meant about maybe 85 to 90% of the sales were being done in store. So if you imagine the digital innovation that's happened since 2010 and the clinic in-person trainings that you just see, the picture in your head, and now you think of TikTok that didn't exist in 2020, in 2010, even the social media or the sales and education person as the sales ambassadors, with social media, it is completely different. The role was completely on education, predominantly was on knowledge transfer, and the sales role was on selling, and the marketers focused on supporting the marketing to get awareness, bring people to the store. But we know today that's it's totally focused on commercial acceleration. So it's changed quite a bit over the last 15 years.
And when we think about the digital footprint expanding so much, and it's evolving so many skill sets, but specifically for the education, are there other factors in your mind that have led to where it is currently today?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to it before. God, how many things have changed. It's actually shocking how fast things change if you reflect upon it. I really deciphered it down to 5 real things that I think have changed, and lots of headwinds beyond digital explosion, which I'll reference as well. Definitely the scrutiny on profit and return on investment. I mean, post 2018, even there were margin compressions. You had COVID turnaround, restructuring, and every single dollar from that point forward, had to prove more return on investment. education, instead of being like a nice to have, was a show me the actual sales lift, which had some rigor on the sales side too, but that then became, you needed to be accountable for it in order for me to give you money or resources or whatever it may be. The digital explosion we alluded to earlier, but like TikTok has completely changed the way we discover products. Social selling, influencers has completely changed the way you were in a department store and you had your counter exclusivity. But even if you look at the top 2 channel expansions in the market right now, being Sephora and Ulta, there are content ecosystems that are based on self-sell, or go and pick up from yourself. So all of that has kind of changed in terms of the environment. Definitely advocates AI and try-on tools. So as we have this new technology that's coming with, you've seen the influx of virtual try-ons that are online and in store, skin diagnostic tools, AI powered recommendation. If I want something for my lipstick, maybe I go in and put something in, in a chat GPT or whatever it is. And now my recommendation come to me. I don't need a sales service or education. I can look for my education. So now we're competing with tech in terms of educating, right? And that didn't exist 15 years ago. Definitely the retail fragmentation, which I said, specialty retail growth, Ulta, Sephora, the whole influx and acceleration influencer e-commerce for sure, and TikTok selling, and also leaner teams. I mean, I have so much heart for the teams now. They're doing consolidated 3 brands versus the 1 brands of the past. Education and sales are blending. So when you look over the past 15 years, that's a big evolution. And you could layer on. So I would definitely say the scrutiny of profit and ROI, the digital explosion, AI tools and tech try on and all the rest of that, retailer fragmentation and leaner teams. But now consumers, as they come in, they're also different because they're dealing with looking at reviews. They know about dupes. They're going to argue with you. They're going in 10 times the speed. So it's been a huge acceleration that's happened in sales and education, and we're needing to adapt to it as well.
So when you talk about, the tech playing into it, and then consumers just being more savvy, more educated, going into these stores, a lot of times with a mission, they know what they want. And if they're not buying it online, they're going in. So when we talk through these kind of scenarios, what do you feel are some of the top skills now that sales and education folks need to have in order to be competitive in today's market?
I think, first of all, we need to recognize that sales isn't just sales and education isn't just education. We spoke about that, or I spoke about it a little bit earlier. I think it's no longer purely individual silos. I think they've become hybrid, but I'd like to coin the term like they're hybrid commercial athletes because they are still depended on more than ever. So what skills do you need to be kind of the perfect hybrid commercial athlete who's agile in education and agile in sales with all these headwinds against you? And I think, if I was to give some recommendation on skills, or the skills that I think are really important, I think commercial fluency. If you are in the field, you need to know your sell-through. You need to know your door productivity. You need to know your conversion rates. I think, even as a salesperson, I've been trying to get sales teams to understand the basics of a P&L. So that commercial fluency is going to do you so much good in terms of standing out. I think channel influence and knowing how to influence understanding each channel and knowing how to influence each channel is probably going to be another amazing skill to just hone in on. Realize that's, not talking, I know a lot of people know this, but selling at Sephora is not like selling at Ulta. It's not like selling at the department store. And it's definitely not like selling on direct to consumer. So each environment, understand the different traffic patterns, the associate engagement, the incentive models, what the consumer is wanting in those environments. They will help you hone into selling and educating better. I think also the agility and innovation. I think that you can participate in terms of like determining for yourself, can I do micro training? Can I do social amplification? Can I do on-demand learning? Can I use AI? to maximize my skill set. And it's also utilizing that from the sense of, as an individual, how am I always creating value? Like, create a value creation mindset. Like, don't just train, start to ask, like, what problem am I solving for? You know, what business do I need to, you know, grow to, and or what dollar amount do I need to get, and look to create value to the right audiences. And that audience is both your consumer, but both, you know, the corporate, you know, vertical that you're leading up to. And always think about, and I think it's really important because I've seen a lot of people do this really well who've been on my team. What's your personal brand and what's your influence? Because some people think just because they're in store, they don't have that, but actually they have more than if they, you know, were in a corporate role 100% of the time, you know, and some people in the field are in corporate roles. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story, how that impacted me personally at one point with a lovely lady in Vancouver who I hope she watches this video one time, because she really changed me leading a business because of the information that she gave me at that time. And she did influence quite dramatically the business that we were working on. So build your ideas beyond scope, keep your relationships open, and modernize your insights. I think those are some of the skills that will definitely serve you well now, you know, in this new environment that will continue to change.
And I love that. I think that so many of us don't realize who inspires, or who you can inspire, or who has inspired. I mean, there's always opportunities to lead by example, and as you're doing, Jackie, sharing the wealth of knowledge, and that individual really inspired you. And is there more details that you can give on the backstory behind this individual that you said really inspired you?
I mean, I was going to go into it a little bit later for sure, but because I have another story that it kind of leads back to. But, you know, that's more related to something that's not personal brand, but I can't tell the story and then relate back to it anyway. So I had a lovely girl named Shannon. I won't say her last name. She worked in Vancouver as a sales lead. I went into her market and she kept a close relationship to me. I remember, like, she had a direct report. Like, it's so big of an organization. She had a sales director she reported into, that, you know, someone else reported to me, and that person was maybe 1 or 2 steps removed from me. But we built a very close relationship, and we took her to a global sales meeting, and they produced a product innovation that wasn't offered in our regional market. She approached me that day and she said, you know, I think there is a gap. And I think there's a gap in this particular channel. And I thought about it, and I talked to her more about it, got the insights towards it, went towards that channel, talked about that channel, negotiated that product gap in. It was a brush line that was very necessary. There wasn't any of them in the environment, the commercial environment we were in. The person took wanted the brush line. It was an impact of about $3 million of net shipments for me and the team that year, which meant their bonuses were impact, which meant everybody else had an additional innovation that worked in their market, you know, and that person went so far beyond. And I don't even think, you know, I thanked her at the time, but this is many years later. She went beyond and built relationships in retail vendors that we weren't in, which at the time there was a retailer called London Drugs. She was able to network me through to the president of London Drugs at the time, and that negotiated the entire contract for Estée Lauder, all brands, with London Drugs in Vancouver. And it was thanks to her just building the relationship, speaking up, sharing her ideas, which, you know, she didn't have to think they were big ideas. You know, she was very separated by region and both by proximity and by not working in the corporate office on a day-to-day basis. So those are the type of examples that you can see. You can really, like, leverage your personal brand, but also add incredible value. But it benefits the whole entire team. Yeah,
it's a perfect example of not staying in your lane. It's if you see an opportunity, speak up. You never know what that opportunity can lead to, and just what you shared, that's significant growth opportunities. So thank you for sharing that. So I want to talk about winning in the field currently. So what do you feel is a field sales strategy or a toolbox that should be in place today in the current retail landscape?
I mean, I love the idea of a toolbox because it goes back to me remembering all those like selling toolboxes where you go in and it was like, magic in a box and we sell to the seller. So I think if you're thinking of it like your own little toolbox or the little thing you're going to put into, I think the one thing you have to say is what used to be in the toolbox before and what's in it after. Today, it's not just about product knowledge anymore. So don't think it's enough if you had like, this particular product and you're trying to sell it on. Your toolbox needs to now include more than just selling the product or knowing about the product, which used to be everybody's like, a passion that says that it was enough at that point in time.
Yeah.
Now you need a whole bunch more. I think I talked about commercial acumen, sales fundamentals. Know your numbers better than anyone else, better than the retailer. Know your ranking. Know what's happening in the door. Know when your inventory turns. Know the gaps and productivity. Gaps in terms of category productivity and gaps in terms of space and gaps against your competition. I have another story that I'll come back to about that though too, but business acumen, like where is the retailer hurting? Where can you deliver an opportunity? Like where are the category SKUs that are underperforming? Where can your team plug a gap? Those are all the thinking parts of like your business. I think the problem solving mindset is another tool you need, aggressive resourcing, getting creative, doing local activations, like where, the gap analysis is all really like, where can I solve the problems? Even if someone's not giving me $100,000 more dollars to fuel whatever initiative I have. I think digital self-education, like, social algorithms, micro content, how you train associates digitally using AI tools, get educated on that stuff because right now you need them more than ever. And you can give yourself an advantage if you put that in your toolbox for yourself. And also I think tribe building, it existed before where it's like you go into particularly a Sephora department store and there were dedicated staff there. Know that every time you're in the room, you have the opportunity to create a seller when you are not in the room. So, and I think even if we can do it to consumer, if I have a great interaction with a BA, I walk away with my mascara and I'm like, look at my mascara, friend. Like, and a good example, I think of this in terms of this landscape and toolbox, so sales fundamentals, big business acumen, problem solving mindset, digital education, tribe building. I think those are all important. One thing that I will come to a story, but one thing that I think more important than anything else, I want to recognize this more than anything else. The field and education teams are strained. So even if you have all this toolbox and you're resourcing all these things that you never had to resource before, please take care of yourself too. Like self-care, I think you need to put in that toolbox because teams are harder numbers. Sales are still growing, but teams are burnt out. So and fewer resources. I want to recognize the fact that put self-care in that toolbox, whatever that looks like for you. Definitely put that toolbox in yourself. But a small little story on that as well. I'll park that story because I know we're going to talk about ROI a little bit. So I think those are the fundamentals of a toolbox if what's today looking at.
And I love that you added just the mental health and just the stress involved in hitting numbers, et cetera. And great for leaders to acknowledge that. And it's the small things that I think leaders can do to just highlight that the people that are working today in field are doing more with less and have to have a job, but doing more. So return on investment.
How important those people in the field are. It's so be like how valuable they are. So if they can take a moment for themselves, understanding how valuable they are, the leaders need to understand just how valuable that those teams are because they're everything for the sell through. I mean, you can't sell in unless someone's selling through. So and the information knowledge that you get being direct to the consumer is like nothing else. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. So return on investment, something that you mentioned earlier, actually, when we started this discussion, it's, being able to highlight, and that is something that brands are looking at every dollar. Where is the investment and how is this impacting profitability? And I do find in my years of interviewing field education and sales, it's like a 50-50 depending on the professional's background. If they came from smaller indie homegrown brands, they don't have sometimes the fundamentals to understand that return on investment as someone that's coming from a larger brand. And it is essential. It's essential because you have to be able to demonstrate how you are impacting sales. So how can you shed some light on this topic? And for folks maybe that haven't developed it at the expertise that they need to, what can they do to develop the skill?
Yeah. I'm laughing because in the side of my eye, I can see a text coming through from somebody from finance who's watching this call right now. So hopefully,
they love it.
A very important question, I'm sure, is the text later. But listen, like you need to ask for the tools that you need to do to deliver the ROI. So like, if you want, if you need more, exposure to things that are going to create an ROI, I think fundamentally, first of all, realize that the cost needs to give $1 back. If you're not knowing how the fundamentals of ROI work, start to ask maybe for exposure and training on ROI. Can you sit in a sales review if that's not part of your normal nomenclature in your job? Can you sit as part of a forecast session to see how that is? Because a huge retail gap is inventory. I've seen it happen in a lot of stores. You wouldn't realize how much vocaling sales gaps in terms of forecasting will replenish you to be able to get more sales to deliver more return on investment. I think account planning sessions to realize how much what is done, how you're being planned, what is being sent. I look for looking for inventory gaps. I think getting that mindset will help you get into the mindset of looking at things through a return on investment lens, because you're looking at how a business operates. So like, listen, my example that I wanted to go back to on how you build ROI, I had a lovely lady, and I was in Toronto at the time, and I went to a store, and I went with our sales director at the time, and she was a lovely AE, and we visited 5 doors, and it was something small, like a $2,000. When you look at by the doors, sometimes the doors are very funny, and there was like a $5,000 gap or $2,000 gap year over year on one of these doors. So we just sat down, and I started to say to her, like, why do you think this $5,000 gap exists in this business? Like, what's going on with this store? How do you think maybe we can resolve for this $5,000 gap? Is it an opportunity door? Is it the inventory? And when she started to think about those doors and whether they were under supported, under traffic, they didn't have inventory, they had the wrong focus, they weren't getting events, she had a plethora of resources to be able to prove her ROI, and maybe she had asked for $500 more to like fuel an event or something, which we're happy to give her if she could make that, $5,000. But you think it's one door and $5,000 gap. You add that up to 10 doors, suddenly you have a whole bunch of money that you're essentially being able to fuel. So, I think starting to think, and remember, your bonus is tied to this. So like, you need to achieve the sales goal. So think like a business owner. How would I spend my money? What do I need to grow my business? Like do I need to just look at the opportunities by the door? Do I need to invest? If I need to invest, how am I going to get the money back? And pilot things, maybe, prove that you can get a lift on it, and if you need to ask for more budget, but come in with the mindset of, I need this budget because this is how much I'm going to get back. Like, ROI is not finance. It's just logic and measurement. So understand the fundamentals of ROI, and you will be doing your job like nobody's business. You'll become invaluable to everybody.
I love it. Great advice. So one of the other topics I want to now explore is, we both know the volume of jobs impacted in field will not return. I mean, that's just the reality. So you've got a lot of professionals that maybe haven't evolved and are in a very competitive job market and having a difficult time with less jobs. What is some of the recommendations that you would make if we were to just highlight 3 where they could really hone in to evolve in the sales and education function?
Okay. So this is the point where I pause, and as a leader, I'm going to give some reassurance to the field. Whether education, sales, hybrid, it doesn't matter. And it's solely based on what I feel, but I feel that there are many other leaders who feel the same way. Field sales are still the DNA and the bones of this business, and it will not go away. I mean, they are fundamentally who is dealing with the consumer on a day-to-day basis. I mean, my evidence of that is, look at COVID, right? You had, an opportunity where digital had surged at that point in time, and everyone, all the field sales people were at home, and they were, what's going to happen? And as soon as COVID relaxed on us, brick and mortar returned and remained. And like, even if you're looking at what the growth is of digital, that's where you're like, it's evolving, but not to the extent you're thinking. So like digital penetration, when I was talking about the 10-15%, it's maybe at the high end about 30% of the business, barring Amazon and all the other, total direct players. But if you're looking at, a self-assist player, they're probably 30% of the business at most. That means that 70, if not 80% of stores of sales are still in stores. That is 80% of the business being driven, or the revenue, being driven by our sales teams and by our education. So know that the roles that you are doing, are still valuable, and that these businesses, some of them don't even want to increase their digital presentation penetration. So that means physical retail is not dead, but profitability expectations are much higher. So, I think that you just need to know that all of the things that I said about the hybrids, of education and with profitability higher, you need to realize that, the DNA may be there. It's the DNA, but it's changing. So look at the changes and how you need to change to it. I think commercial literacy will be survival now for field and education people. You need to constantly, upskill yourself. You need to constantly think different. You need to constantly offer ideas. You need to drive, idea generation. You need to listen to what's happening in the market more, share your knowledge more, make cross-functional impact, think about your influence. That is modern field excellence. And I think despite the fact that a lot of jobs have gone away, there is a lot of opportunity to essentially enhance your skills so you become the best of the jobs that are still available. And I think fundamentally every other job that exists in beauty, essentially springboards from the field. So I wasn't a field person. I grew up as a marketer, but but I really value the field sales teams and education teams. So I think that they know, and I know a lot of very skilled GMs. I can name one at L'Oreal, who is one of the biggest brands that I had just worked with, and she came through the field, and it serves her very well in the business that she does today.
Absolutely. Great.
Debbie, I just want to bring up a couple of comments that we've had, and just to remind people that if you do have any questions, now is the time to pop them in the chat, and I'll bring them up to Jackie and Debbie. So Jennifer said there's a great point around the value of content ecosystems in brands' approaches to social selling. So people are agreeing with you. And I know this one is very important to you, Jackie. Somebody said, I love the term hybrid commercial athlete. Those are the individuals who will be successful today as well as tomorrow by being able to make impacts in customized ways based on where they are. Leaders that understand that will be put the right people to the right places as well. So thank you very much, Gabrielle, for your comments there. Okay, Debbie, as I mentioned, if anybody wants to put any more questions in, now is the time. But Debbie, I think it might be time to tell people who we're going to have on our next show next month.
Absolutely. So in March, we are going to be featuring Akshay Talidi, Chief Scientific Officer at Supergroup and President of Society of Cosmetic Chemists. And, I had a conversation with Akshay a few months ago in regards to product development. And I tapped him specifically because he has such an excellent background, but he is such a compelling leader in evolving in innovation. Look, 65% of consumers research products and ingredients before they purchase, and it has made a lot of changes to the way product developers are operating and how brands are hiring. So having more of a chemistry background, understanding how to collaborate with chemists and formulators are all key in today's product development world. And so we're going to touch upon, and the objective of the call is, of our episode is product development, new playbook, science, and talent. So goal of the conversation is, how as a product developer, do you remain competitive in this landscape and stay up to date with the ingredients and the way that hiring is happening in development. So it'll be next month, March 26th, 12 p.m. PST. So let's go ahead and move into our next question. So Jackie, we talk about pop-up events. I mean, pop-up events, you know, they were obviously obsolete during COVID. They have returned, and quite frankly, some brands are just doing it really creative, driving those customers into the retail stores. So where are you seeing it effective, and what other strategies are effective?
I mean, listen, I'm going to delineate the marketing role and the sales and education role. Like when you're thinking of pop-ups, I mean, great. I mean, pop-ups are hugely expensive. I haven't seen one pop-up that's cheap. You know, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars. And like, especially if you're wanting a key exposure space in a large city where they're the most valuable. I think pop-ups are an expense, and they're expensive, but they're more of a marketing expense. And they drive more awareness than sales in terms of the output, you know, but they are important. I think there are more scalable methods to essentially drive increased traffic. You know, there's a plentiful amount of them. If I started to think about more scalable methods just to be innovative myself, I think, you know, event in a box kits, train the trainer systems, you know, associated incentives. Now the gamification with associates is probably something interesting. You know, these are all old ag, but, you know, GWP strategies tied to traffic drivers. I think digital certification programs, you know, I think localized content creation, or even the use of some retailer tools. Funnily enough, I was working with another specialty retail channel, and they have, you know, you can email their customers if you give them enough chance. You can take over their screens in terms of the stores. They can geo-target, they can e-blast, they can do, you know, they can do a whole bunch of things that many people are not doing. So if there's not a pop-up available, there is a bunch of other innovative ways to tap into ideas to increase traffic ongoing. I mean, we've pitched a lot of them in the past. I'm thinking from a scalable perspective, but I think the most important thing to leave legacy, even not just permanent increased traffic, if it's not a pulse of time, I think the most valuable thing you can do is create sellers when you're not there. You know, use the multiplier effect and replicate. You know, that's why you're going to increase your traffic, is people will come back in if you create ambassadors, for sure.
Absolutely. Great advice.
Sorry about that, guys. My internet just turned off. I'm so sorry. I'm back now.
So I wanted to also go with my final question, which I consistently ask every guest that we have on, Jackie, is what are the attributes that you look for when hiring?
It's an easy question, but a hard one, because it's personal at the same time, you know, so you can go through 100 interviews and maybe that's not the job for you, but maybe it's not the team for you either, you know? So when I look at people that I hire builders, definitely. I hire people who have an entrepreneurial mindset. I think people who are very, very hungry. I think people who have a little bit of inner fire. You know, that are definitely passionate about the brand and know the brand very well. When I see that authentically coming through in an interview, you can't turn it down. You get infected by it. You know, most of my teams have taught me more than I know, and I love it. I've had many people in my office, you know, like telling me things that I'm just like, oh, I had no idea. Commercial curiosity. I love when people think about them, when they ask questions, when they go away, but more so too when they have the courage to come back and challenge me on things. You know, if I'm giving a direction of things, or I'm thinking about a solution towards them, if they're coming back and challenging me on an idea, or they're challenging me on the business, I love that in my team personally. I think most importantly to me, though, in hiring is cultural fit. Like, you know, I know people hate this term, but, you know, it's like you create a little bit of a family environment, because you have to spend, you know, 90% of your 80% of your time at work. I think you know, for me, it's very important that somebody who comes in that is a cultural fit. So those are the things that I hire, and I know, ironically, like they're skill based, but you know, it's more softer skill based than anything else.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Amazing. Thank you. Now, the other question that we always ask, Jackie, is, as we sort of knew that you would do, you've dropped a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. You've really given a lot. So thank you so much. But we like to end on a really top tip. So everything that you've discussed today, is there one thing that you want viewers to make sure that they take away? This concept is really important for them.
I mean, the idea of this, I think hear the end of your little sentence there, but my top tip is like, you know, and I love how, I think it was Gabrielle who brought it up. It's like, think of yourself as a hybrid commercial athlete. You know, that like this person who's blended, who's got all these skills, because that mindset, I think, is growth leadership right now. You know, the fundamentals of, you know, field selling are evolving. You know, I feel selling still everything. It's, you know, it's a lunch, but you have to think yourself as like as a hybrid commercial athlete now. No longer the sales or the marketing or the, you know, or the education person anymore. So that's my final thought. But I'm hoping I'm leaving everyone a little bit inspired because I love this topic so much.
I think I can prove to you that you are. So we've had some lovely comments. Megan said, this is great. So much new, core, relevant information and excellent reminders. And they're looking forward to the next show as well, Debbie. Erin has said, this great advice and perspective. And Lila has said, the field is the heartbeat of the brand. We are the human connection through storytelling and active listening. We translate the brand into personal experience, creating a unique story for every customer. So I think a lot of people are very much agreeing with you and very much valuing the information that you've given us today. So thank you very much, Jackie.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie, for attending today and sharing all your wealth of information and inspiration, which is the whole purpose of Beauty Talent Talk. We look forward to seeing everyone next month. And thank you for joining and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.